Charkopolis.
Charkopolis.
A good behind-the-scenes helper for this channel.
Hee hee hee.
Let's see. Oh, where's our sound effects?
Wait, I am not at all ready.
So we're going to talk about issues with omnipotence, because it's just one of those things that really irks me. Hooray!
Yay! It irks you.
So the idea, there's a lot of just confusion with this idea of omnipotence, and I don't think Christians and theists and philosophers really appreciate how bad this confusion is, because the problem of omnipotence really boils down to what the heck is a god? How do I know a god if I ever see one? So a fun thought problem for this is...
All right, what do you have?
You imagine somebody knocks on your door tomorrow morning.
All right.
You open up the door, and there's a burning bush there talking to you. It says, "Hello there, I'm God. You should probably worship me."
All right, so aside the usual, I have not taken any sort of hallucinogenics or anything like that, I am rational and sober, and I see a burning bush.
Yeah, exactly.
And it talks to me. Okay.
It's talking to you. Or maybe you see an old guy in a beard just floating there, and he says, "Hello, I'm God."
Hello. Something like that. Okay.
Yeah,
that's the voice that comes to my mind, apparently.
Maybe he sounds like an 8-year-old kid. You know, like that kid from that Twilight Zone, that little 8-year-old kid.
Oh no!
It just, "I'm God. You should worship me."
Okay, well, I don't know about you, but if someone were to come to my door and say such a thing, I would be slightly skeptical about the whole thing. I'm not going to instantly just drop to my knees and say, "Thank you for showing up at my door so I can immediately worship right now."
Well, yeah, exactly. Are you just going to take this claim at face value, or are you going to try and verify it a little bit?
A little doubt in my mind. Maybe this isn't really happening.
Right. So how would you go about verifying this claim? So the idea is I need basically a list of properties that says things that are gods should satisfy these properties.
Yeah, okay. So just make up a little list, and if the person at the door can check off this list, 1, 2, 3, okay, you're God.
Yeah,
I'm
exactly.
satisfied. Okay, fair enough.
You know, step 1, are you omnipotent? Yes, okay. Are you omniscient? Yes. Did you create the universe? Yes. Are you going to judge me for my sins in the afterlife? Yes. Okay. You know, and if it answers yes to all these questions and demonstrates, not just answers yes, but demonstrates.
Okay. Well, you see, that would be my first contention, because, well, it is pretty easy to lie about all those things and just say yes.
Right. So it needs to do more than just say yes.
Yeah.
It has to actually be able to demonstrate somehow.
Yeah, I'm a little skeptical about it. How would this God here prove these things on the list?
Exactly. So the problem is, of course, if it can't prove them all. Maybe it can go omnipotent, omniscience, but it didn't really create the universe. Somebody else did that. Well, okay, you're something very close to a god. You're like a god, but you're not the god we're interested in. Okay, and then we can make that conclusion. Or
yeah.
Or what about the problem of omnipotence now? So how do I verify that item on the list?
How do I even know if I can check that item off?
Yeah,
depending on the actions of our participant at the door. Okay. So what do you got?
Yeah. So the first problem, of course, is with God. You have like principle or idea properties that are just meaningless. Like, you know, are you spaceless, timeless, and immaterial? Well, the simple fact that you're here talking to me means you are probably in space and doing things in time.
Yes, very spaceful and very timeful, filled with all sorts of space and time.
Yeah, so the very definition of God kind of accidentally precludes it against the possibility of ever being verified. Right?
Yeah. Well, yeah, okay, so that one just has to go out.
So that's probably not a good items to have on your list. So the more common ones are, you know, the usual omnipotence, omnibenevolence, omniscience, and omnipresence, and blah blah blah. So my personal favorite one is the omnipotence issue. So how do we verify the omnipotence? Well, again, we have the same problem.
Man, I know your favorite is the omnipotence, given how many videos you've already done on it. But yes, I'm game for talking about it a little more.
And I'm sorry to beat a dead horse, because this is just a thing that is not well defined.
Well, yeah, to be fair, it's not well defined. Well, no, it is well defined, but by a bunch of different people and in a bunch of different ways.
There's a whole bunch of different definitions for it. Everybody thinks they have the definition, but they don't seem to understand the fundamental practical problem that this boils down to. How do I recognize omnipotence when I see it?
Exactly.
What gauntlet do I subject some candidate agent to in order to determine, yes, you've passed the test and you're officially omnipotent, or no, you missed the test. You're maybe really powerful and awesome, but you're just not quite omnipotent. So what is this gauntlet I have to subject this being to? So again, we have the same idea.
Yeah. Okay. So my first inclination of omnipotence is going straight to my good old buddy Q.
Yeah. Maybe John Delancey appears at your door and says, "Hello, I'm omnipotent."
And after I ask for his autograph, yeah.
So I need a list that says things an omnipotent being can do, and then I can start checking them off. If you can do everything on that list, then I can be satisfied. Okay, you are officially an omnipotent being. And if he misses one, oh, you're just not quite omnipotent. And if you're not omnipotent, you're not God.
Yeah, that's a fair test. But what exactly we're going to test? I mean, you can't say, snap your fingers and give me a cigar. I mean,
well, that could be one of the items on the list. Can you snap your fingers and give me a cigar?
But is that really omnipotence? I mean, it just so might happen that he has cigars in his back pocket, and he was just ready to go with that.
Right. So can you materialize a cigar out of nothing with the snap of your fingers?
That would be a better one. Yeah.
Yeah. And okay, can you create universes ex nihilo? Can you arbitrarily rearrange matter and energy according to whims? Right? These are perfectly valid things that could go on the list. And we could just itemize it. I know 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. These are
sure.
You can do these things. You're officially omnipotent. Now, obviously, sometimes it's not necessarily practical to define a finite list. That's the simplest way.
Yeah. The other problem is my list, of course, could be different than your list.
And that's okay. That's why we're here. We need to flesh this out and officially agree what is this list.
Fair enough.
What goes on that list?
What would be on your list?
Well, that's a good question. It's kind of hard to say because every time I think about this concept of omnipotence, it kind of logically implodes on itself. The simplest for me would be, can you rearrange what I just said? Can you just rearrange matter and energy according to whims? That's a nice, well-defined idea to me. Maybe it contains some problems, but at least I can just start throwing things out. Show me a pink elephant right now and make it hover above me. Okay, let's teleport to Jupiter and don't let me die. Okay, and if he just does all this random crap, I can just safely say, okay, you're probably omnipotent.
That's a good start. I'll give you that one. Yeah.
So, the problem is sometimes this list isn't really a finite list. The simplest way to define a set is just enumerate elements, but you don't have to just enumerate them individually. You could have an infinite list defined by some kind of an algorithm, say. So.
Yeah.
And that would be okay.
Yeah, okay, so granted, it's easy enough to make an exhaustive list, but how many possible things could be on it? It could go on ad infinitum. So it might just be easier to say, let's set a conditional rather than just a list of conditions, of strict, simple conditions. So yeah, but that's a basic set definition anyways. I'm okay with that.
For the most part, yeah. You have to be careful with this, obviously. There are well-known pitfalls in set theory where this kind of description blows up. And this is actually why a lot of mathematical sets, you aren't allowed to use unrestricted comprehension when defining sets. The proper way to define a set is to define sort of prototypical elements and then define how you can extract more elements from those individual units. You say, you're the
Yeah,
mathematician, so you can correct me if I'm wrong on this. But like, this is how the infinite set of numbers is defined.
I always look forward to correcting you when you're wrong, especially with my mathematical prowess. Yeah.
But like, this is how the natural numbers are defined. You say,
Yeah,
there exists
absolutely.
a natural number called 0, and then for every natural number there is another natural number called the successor. And then from there, boom, you just created all of the natural numbers by starting with an initial prototypical set and then working your way out.
Oh, yeah, that's
so
fair
that
enough.
is a proper set definition.
Yeah, you can start with there is a thing called 1, and if I add a 1 to it, well, that's another number, and we'll call it 2. And so on and so on with 3, 4, 5. And that's just fine, absolutely fine to define the natural numbers that way. Yeah.
Yeah. But a bad way to define a set would just be, if you can describe a thing with properties, it is now officially a set. Because that runs head-on to Russell's paradox.
Well, okay, so with Russell's paradox, that's where you're talking about you're talking about the set itself as part of the condition.
Yes.
Now, usually you don't get into that kind of stuff when you're just giving conditions of things, but nothing stops a person from putting the set itself in question into its condition.
Exactly. And that can very quickly lead you to horrible logical problems if you're not careful.
Oh my, yes.
This is the problem of what we call unrestricted comprehension, right? If you can name it and it has properties, it's now a set, officially a mathematical set, a collection of things.
Right.
And of course,
that was the naive idea back in the late 19th.
Yeah, that's why it was called naive set theory. That's what they thought. Well, if you can just describe it with properties, you have a set.
Yeah, that's the only thing people want to do with a set. If you can tell me a condition of which allows me to determine if something is in or not in said set, then that's a working definition for the set.
Yeah, exactly. So obviously the problem with this is, like you said, if I just sort of feed the set definition back onto itself, you run into issues of like undecidability, you get intrinsic paradoxes, and it's all about this concept of a self-referencing negation. I take a definition, I insert a negation into it, and then just feed it back into itself and watch what happens.
Yeah, so that's what Russell pointed out to his fellow mathematicians. Well, consider all the set. Well, yeah, consider the set of all sets that don't contain themselves, and away goes the naive definition of conditionals to sets.
Right. You cannot answer that question because any answer you give makes a contradiction. It just logically can't work either way. Yeah, so it's not a problem with the set definition. I should say it's not a problem with the set per se. It's a problem with just your definition being too sloppy.
Yes. It's the problem with the naive idea that give me any condition you want that you vocalize, and that's a way of determining if something is in a set or not. And then Russell comes along, and he says, well, anything that is in the set isn't. And if it isn't in the set, it is.
Yeah.
And that was the condition, and people couldn't argue that. All they could do was grunt and be mad at Russell.
Yeah. So what we'll find is this is exactly what kind of the omnipotence paradox is all about. There's any different number of varieties of omnipotence paradox, but they all share that same idea of just, here is a definition for our omnipotence. What happens when I take that definition and just feed it back on itself?
Yeah.
So now this is actually more than just Russell's paradox, right? It's pretty much widely acknowledged that this is also a problem with Gödel's incompleteness theorem, and it's the halting problem, and it's the liar's paradox. These are all just manifestations of that same idea, a self-referencing feedback.
Yeah, well, okay, so Russell definitely pointed out self-referential feedback, is a problem with naive set definition. Gödel comes along and shows that, well, if you actually try and make propositional statements refer back onto themselves, you get problems.
Oh yeah, it's built into propositional logic itself starts suffering from this issue.
Yeah, doing logic on logic itself, you run into problems.
Yeah, and then computer science comes along with algorithms trying to do logical operations, which
on other algorithms.
On other algorithms,
and
so they start blowing
up. Yeah, out pops the halting problem.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And it really does kind of boil down to the liar's paradox in a very roundabout way. It's just saying this sentence is false. And you can even watch what happens when you try and evaluate it. You say, well, if it's false, then it's false that it's false, which means it must be true. But if it's true, then it must be false. But then if it's true that it's false, which makes it false that it's false, and so it's true, and you get what's called an oscillation. It just goes back and forth between true and false, and you never finish the train of thought. You're like, well, it should be true, but it should be false, but if it's false, it's true, so true, false, true, false, true, false, and it just never ends.
Right.
And so this is where you get this idea of undecidability. Like, there are just certain propositions you can't tell whether or not they're true.
Yeah, now, to be fair, it's fine to oscillate true, false, true, false, if you know that at some point you'll end up at just one of them, where if you actually converge to just one or the other. Mm-hmm. But if you know that's not going to happen, then you're done. Then if it's never going to be true or false, what do you call such a thing?
It's just an undecidable proposition, right?
Yeah, and undecidable. And again,
the mere act of deciding makes it false.
Yeah.
Or makes it contradictory.
It's fair enough to point out that this stuff was all laid out mathematically, essentially, by Russell's paradox right at the beginning of the 20th century. And ever since then, mathematicians said, okay, well, we better not do this, and we've just simply moved on, and just don't do that.
Yeah, that's sort of the answer. It's just, okay, here's the paradox. We'll just not define our sets in a way that's amenable to this paradox anymore. But this has far-reaching applications, because any time you define anything that's in some sort of logical set definition that's amenable to this same template of Russell's paradox, then you're going to face the exact same problems.
Oh, absolutely. That's the beauty of Russell's paradox, how it's defined in terms of a set theoretical proposition.
Mm-hmm. So anything you can define in terms of sets that naively fits into the template of a Russell's paradox is now Russell's paradox in a nutshell, just with different words.
Mm-hmm.
And you'll notice, like, this is how the omnipotence paradox is going, because I'm trying to define a set of things that omnipotent beings should do. Can he do these things, or can he not do these things?
Well, yeah. Okay, so if we just start off with the naive definition of omnipotence, okay, you can do anything at all, which I'm sure many people out there.
Well, the most famous was René Descartes. He thought, if you can say it out loud, God can just make it happen.
Okay, well, there's somebody that considered that. But I would say even today, there are plenty of people that consider this the definition of omnipotence.
There are a lot of naive Christians who've commented on this. They'll just say, well, God can just do anything. If it's illogical, so what? God's above logic. Like, there are Christians today who say this. They may not be like professionally trained philosophers, but they're out there. You know,
it's true. Okay, they haven't considered it, but this is what they contend to believe as the definition of omnipotence.
Yeah. A good modern philosopher, I've got his profile here, is Earl Coney. This guy is a philosophy professor at the University of Rochester. And he actually wrote an entire paper in the mid-90s where he defined omnipotence as literally the power to render any proposition true.
Oh, so that is straight up the naive, absolute omnipotence definition.
The definition, the title of the paper was actually the possibility of power beyond possibility.
That's deep, man.
Like, this is modern philosophy at work here. That's his definition. So one of the biggest things that irks me about hearing complaints is, a lot of Christians keep saying, you're not using the proper definition. That's not what real philosophers use. And it's like, so? Yeah, it is. There's 6 definitions on Wikipedia alone.
Oh my, yes.
So there's no such thing as a right or wrong definition. This is important to really just say. The definitions are only good or bad. A good definition is meaningful, it's consistent, and useful. Well, and it represents what people generally imagine when they think of an idea.
Right.
Bad definitions will be inconsistent, they'll be tautological, or nebulous, or ambiguous, or just completely detached from what we think when we hear a word. So the whole point of this discussion is to just say, what is a good definition for omnipotence, and what are some bad definitions?
Yeah, I think that's what we were trying to converge to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we'll start with like the obvious. The naive definition just says, if you name it, God can do it. The power to just do anything. And there are people who have believed this, and they're not very bright. I mean, because the obvious defeater to that is, okay, can God schnargle a blorg? Can God count to green? I just threw words out there, and the words don't really mean anything. But by that definition, he should make it happen.
Maybe not to you, but to God, of course, it makes perfect sense, and God will do it.
He'll just make it happen.
1, 2, green.
Assign truth to it. He'll just make it true somehow. He'll just wave his fingers and say, and it's now true.
Okay, so that means God can work under the logical system that every single propositional statement is true.
Well, no, it's not that every single proposition is true. He can just make it true.
Okay, you make it true. Well,
which means he can actually, if you say, can you make everything true? God can just make that happen. Everything is now true.
Okay, so every proposition is true, including all the ones that weren't. I could have sworn that they can't be both.
Right. So this kind of leads you to trouble, because now everything just becomes true and false at the same time, and the whole idea of truth and logic itself just has no meaning.
Collapses under its own stupidity.
Kind of, yeah. But I mean, another problem with this is truth is not really reality. Technically speaking, truth is just an assignment given to propositions. So by that definition, I'm now omnipotent. All I have to do now is conceive of a logical axiomatic framework that declares whatever your action to be true.
Okay, well that's it. You're at my door.
Yeah.
I'm going to start going down my list. All right, can you, make a universe?
Yes, that proposition is axiomatically true. I can make a universe.
All right, do it.
It's true. I don't have to actually do it. Just see, that's the key of the definition. You didn't say
you must be omnipotent.
Do it. You just had to render it true. I just said the proposition is true. That's kind of a subtle fact of logic. Is I can assign truth to whatever I want. It doesn't mean reality will sort of conform in some strict transcendent sense.
Yeah. Well, okay. Other people will have a problem with that disconnect between a logical truth connected to a proposition and the reality of things.
Yeah.
So I think right now we need to make a distinguish. We need to distinguish between logical truths and reality.
Yes, and this is kind of a subtle idea. We don't have to badger it for too long, but just remember, truth is not reality.
I think that's
kind of a key thing. So obviously the naive definition for omnipotence doesn't work, because I can just ask random gibberish, and now I technically haven't asked anything when I just throw gibberish out, but now all of a sudden this being has to make it happen. How does a being make something that isn't anything something? Like, it's not even meaningful now, and any being can more or less satisfy that if you get extra sloppy.
That's true. That's true.
So
like if I'm going to ask you to conjure a cigar into my hand out of nothing.
Well, that's a little more coherent now.
Yeah, so but if it's made of nothing, is it technically already in my hand? I really feel like this kind of a questioning to God is like making like the worst case scenario. Like it goes back to that whole genie scenario. Like you make a wish, but then the genie interprets it in the way that you really didn't want it interpreted, and all of a sudden you end up with like, I don't know, extra long nose hairs coming out of your eyeballs, or
whatever. Just start trying to break it. Like, can I wish for more wishes? And then also, well, no, that I didn't really mean that. You're not allowed to do that. Yeah. Or I wish that making a wish didn't use up a wish. So, and this is kind of one of the great tests of good definitions and good philosophy is how robust is your definition against someone actively trying to logically break it.
Uh-huh.
So obviously that naive definition is no good. What about like the next definition? The common one you'll hear is God can do all that is logically possible.
Oh, yeah, I've heard that one before.
So now you're not allowed to ask gibberish and you're not allowed to ask contradiction.
Okay, so logically possible. Okay, so now your propositional statement has to actually be cogent.
Yes.
You can't count to green anymore.
Uh-huh.
And it has to make sense. No dilly-dallying around. Let's actually be logically consistent now. Okay.
Right. And that's the first problem I have with this definition is logically possible in accordance with what axiomatic framework?
Oh, okay, so what system of logic are you referring to when you're going to say logically possible?
Yeah, because one thing that just irks me, again, about Christian philosophers is they just don't understand logic. Logic, there's like multiple systems of logic out there that you can choose from. You have standard propositional logic, and then you can build on that and create first-order logic. There is tri-state logic. You have fuzzy logic. And there is any number of wacky logics that I can just invent out of nothing.
Well, yeah, that's,
I mean, here is a perfectly valid logical framework. You hand me a proposition, I hereby declare it is axiomatically false. All propositions are false, including this one.
Okay, well, granted that's a logical system. It's a very boring one.
Yeah,
but
it's boring.
It is technically consistent with itself, so.
Well, it doesn't even have to be consistent. There are inconsistent logics. If you define axioms and you can prove via theorem A and the formula not A, oh well, you just defined an inconsistent logic. Darn.
Yeah, but it's still again, it's a boring one and doesn't get very far, but no one stops anybody from actually using that system of logic as opposed to the one we're more familiar with.
Yeah, the universe doesn't explode just because you stated a contradiction. It just means you said something that isn't particularly useful or meaningful to other people.
True.
I don't know what it means.
I mean, false. Damn it, which system are we using?
And not rain at the same time. I don't know what a contradiction would look like.
Yeah.
But there's also, other ideas, like can God draw a square circle? That sounds meaningless at first, but what if I just give it meaning? What if I just draw a square inside of a circle and say, there, that shape is officially dubbed a square circle? It's technically not a contradiction. It sort of sounds oxymoronish, but our language is okay with that if I just give it a coherent meaning.
Well, not to pull out my mathy credentials, but I would say, by what metric are you referring to distance? Normal Euclidean distance, yeah, when you have the set that defines a circle, the good old square root of difference squared. But if you use the good old taxicab metric, if you then render a circle in that metric, set metric, you end up with what looks like a square.
Yeah,
now,
exactly.
Am I cheating? It's a circle under that metric, but when you look at it, it's a square. Does that count?
Yeah, it's okay to just define things, and that's one of the big sloppy issues with logic and language that is difficult to work around. This is why good definitions are important. So, the great way to beat the whole omnipotence issue, God can do all that's logically possible. We'll just start throwing logical possibilities out there. Is it logically possible to jump 5 feet in the air?
Sure. It sounds like it's possible. Sure.
That's a thing people have done, right? Is it logically possible to fly to the moon? Pretty sure that's a thing people have done.
Yes.
Is it logically possible to ride the back of a flying space monkey?
Well, maybe not. I need to see a space monkey.
Just imagine a monkey with wings and yourself on top of it flying.
Yeah, but me imagining it, that makes it logically possible?
Technically, yeah. There's no intrinsic contradiction. And in fact, that's actually the proper definition for logical possibility. Should be logically consistent.
Okay, well, okay. I have to break that one. If we have a space monkey and it has a back of which I can adhere myself to, then if I have all the components, then yes, I can complete that action. riding a space monkey in space.
So this is the first reason why I
logically
hate
possible.
this definition. When you say logically possible, what they really mean is logically consistent.
That's fair.
So that's one of my first big gripes is the language is sloppy again. So at the end of the day, when you say logical possibility, what you're saying is, state an action. If there's no intrinsic contradiction to that action, then it is a thing that goes on the list. So we get back to our algorithm. Does this thing go on the list or not?
Yeah, riding a space monkey on its back out in space must go on the list.
Yeah. So why not? So this now we're getting back to the whole theme of Russell's paradox, because I have a list of things that an omnipotent being should be able to do. Because remember, Q is standing at my doorstep and saying I am omnipotent. So I'm going to go through this list and just start picking items, seeing whether or not he can do them. But the problem is the list itself needs to be coherent and consistent. If the list itself is broken, then the word is broken. I can't challenge Q to his omnipotence gauntlet if omnipotence has no meaning. So I start going down this list of things. Okay, Mr. Q, can you conjure a pink elephant for me? Bam. Okay, good. Mr. Q, can you jump 5 feet in the air? Bam. Mr. Q, can you stand before a podium and truthfully state the words, I am not omnipotent? Mr. Q, can you create a rock that is too heavy for you to lift? Or maybe that's not quite fair. Can you create a rock that satisfies the description of being unliftable by its own maker?
Uh-huh.
Now we're getting tech. So you notice I'm just asking questions
sounds very
that
sneaky.
reference back the actor.
You're going to beat the genie at his own game.
Yes. So this is the problem of Russell's paradox now. It's a self-referential negation. So the paradox of the stone is the classic one, but I kind of like the paradox of the omnipotence. Just cut to the chase. Can you stand before a podium and truthfully state the words, I am not omnipotent? Is that action a logical possibility?
Yeah, so it's fair to say with this kind of proposition, it falls into Russell's paradox in the sense that the moment you determine if you can, you lose the definition of paradox. Mm-hmm. Or, sorry, wow, I can't talk anymore. You lose the definition of omnipotence. However, if you can do it, oh crap, I'm losing myself with this.
If you can
the moment
do it,
you're on one side of the fence, you immediately land yourself on the other side of the fence.
Exactly.
By definition, and it becomes an undecidable thing. So even though in and of itself it's logically cogent as a condition,
yeah,
you cannot determine if that should actually be on your list or not.
Well, remember the definition of the list. Logically possible.
Sure. Well,
is it or is not? Can you imagine?
Yeah, that's where I'm saying, because of Russell's paradox, it's pointing it out that putting this on the list is creating that self-referential paradox that Russell warned us not to do.
Kind of, yeah. Well, I'm deliberately doing that because the definition allowed for it.
Well, and I would say that's the problem with being omnipotent.
Yeah.
If it allows for these pitfalls of naive universal sets, then it's a bad definition.
Exactly. And that's what I've done. I just took the set definition and fed it back to itself and threw a not in there. Self-referential negation is the idea. And so, again, like the problem is if that is an item on the list, then it can't be on the list. But if it's not on the list, it's supposed to be on the list. By definition, it has to be on the list. Because it's a logical.
All things that are logically possible, yeah.
I can go ahead and satisfy that description now, just fine. But apparently, why can't an omnipotent being? So again, it's not my fault. It's not the challenge itself that's broken. It was the definition of omnipotence was broken. Because I broke it. It allowed me to do that.
Yeah, to say that it was logically possible means you should be able to put it on the list, but putting it on the list means it should be possible to do for Q if he's up to the challenge.
Exactly.
It all falls apart. You have to tear up the whole thing. Omnipotence fails.
Yeah, so you're left with the fundamental problem. The capacity to do everything on the list of all that is logically possible is not logically possible. It sounds kind of ironic and silly or paradoxical to say that, but it's consistent to say that sentence. A being that is capable of doing everything on that list will be inconsistent.
Yeah, I do think it's funny how you have people as far ago as like Thomas Aquinas or René Descartes who said, yeah, omnipotence, anything goes. You immediately fall into that pitfall of the naive universal set. Mm-hmm. So what happens? This paradox is pointed out. So what do apologists do? They try and, well, fix the paradox by saying, no, not everything, just things that are logically possible.
Yeah, so the aggravating thing for me is it's a Band-Aid that didn't even fix the problem. The problem is still there. The exact same problem is still there. I just feed your definition back on itself and it blew up, just like before. Well, before, I guess that's not fair. Before, I could feed you incoherent gibberish. At least they solved that problem.
Good job.
Now we can at least, pin it down to a more technicality. Now, and to be fair, this is a technicality. It's a total nitpick, but it is a real logical problem. Because if you allow for paradoxes and contradictions, then anything and everything is now logically true and false at the same time. This is why contradictions are bad. We don't like them.
Yeah, I would say if you're trying to have a logical argument, a nice civil discussion with someone, and they say logic, I can take it or leave it. Well, that's it. You cannot have a cogent argument with somebody like that. Mm-hmm. So if anyone says, forget the logic of it, that's it. That discussion's over. Don't even bother continuing.
So now, okay, so how would a Christian apologist respond to the omnipotence paradox, as we've stated? Well, one very common comeback I've heard is they'll say, there are things you can do, there are things omnipotent beings can do, but they don't necessarily intersect.
Okay. Well, okay, that sounds right because I'm not omnipotent, so I shouldn't be able to do things omnipotent beings can do. So far, I'm on board.
Yes, but an omnipotent being can do all that's logically possible. So if I can stand before a crowd and truthfully state I'm not omnipotent, does that action now go on the list or not?
Well, okay, so
it's a thing I can do that an omnipotent being can't.
Are you better than an omnipotent being? Yeah.
Yeah. And so the problem is like, well, is that logically possible or not? Does it go on the list of logically possible things?
Yeah. So can you honestly lie about something?
Yeah. Oh, that's another great one. Is kind of a sidebar. We'll say God can do all that's logically possible, except he can't lie. God cannot lie.
Yeah, but isn't it logically possible to lie?
I can totally do that. Like, you're killing this idea of omnipotence when you just start randomly mixing and matching these things. Or maybe omnipotence is still valid, but you just killed the God of the Bible.
Well, I want to say
lie.
Well, shouldn't it be that an omnipotent being should be able to do anything I can do and then some?
Right. Like,
okay, well, but I can lie. I can honestly lie. So it sounds like an omnipotent being should be able to do that as well. I think we'd have a problem.
Yeah, like you're just kind of killing this idea of omnipotence now, because like there's just things I can do that the omnipotent being can't do. It's like, can you really do all the things that are possible? Like it's starting to not make sense anymore. So that's not a viable thing. You don't get to say logically possible for me and logically possible for God. That is not in the cards.
Well, again, to add a conditional to the logically possible, it is just nonsense. Like, it's either logically possible or it isn't. It doesn't depend on conditionals. It's simply logically possible or not.
Right.
So if I can jump 5 feet in the air, it is logically possible to jump 5 feet in the air.
Exactly.
I should be able to put that on your list, good sir.
Yeah, this is modal logic too. Like anything that can be done is immediately by definition a logical possibility.
Yeah.
I think the axiom specifically says X implies necessarily possibly X. So if I can go out and flap my arms, then that is now officially a logically possible action. Or if I can at least just imagine some state of affairs where that action is being performed, it goes on the list. It has to.
Yeah, I'm doing it right now even.
Flap, 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 flap. So, okay.
Yeah.
So obviously, that's a terrible comeback. You don't get to say logically possible for me and logically possible for God. But, oh, by the way, you can still do all that's logically possible. That's literally saying there are logically possible things that you can do that aren't technically logically possible. Like, that definition, again, contradicts itself. It's logically possible for you, but it's not logically possible.
No, I want to say that all the things that are possible that I can do are logically possible as well. I'm going to say it's a subset, but I'm going to say all the things that I can do are a subset of all the things a omnipotent being can do.
Exactly.
So I'm going to place this in basic set containment.
Yeah.
If I can jump 5 feet in the air, my action is a subset of an omnipotent being's actions. So can an omnipotent being. Okay, so
now another problem that you'll often hear is you're not allowed to define an action without specifically defining the actor in that sentence. So when I say, is it logically possible to create a rock that satisfies the description of being unliftable by its own maker, the response will be, it depends who's doing it.
Oh, depends on the maker. Okay.
Because you haven't specified the action yet, because we need to know who the maker is what they'll say. At which point I'm saying, tough shit. Like, this is an intrinsic problem of language, buddy. I can add self-references to my language. If you deny me self-referential propositions, you just killed arithmetic.
Well, and logic.
Well, logic, very basic Mickey Mouse logic is okay. But remember, Gödel's Incompleteness Theorem says any logical language capable of doing arithmetic is incomplete, because it will be powerful enough to effectively say this sentence is false in some logical capacity. It will have self-referential, undecidable proposition.
Yeah, you will be able to construct a propositional statement equivalent to that in whatever system you have. That's, yeah. No, but to say that it's the whole thing is dependent on the maker, well, then if you're going to say something like that, okay, well then, are you just saying that God can do anything that's logically possible for God to do?
Yeah, and that's the problem. You run into these sort of tautological statements. The list of all things God can do is now the list of all things God can do.
Well, that's boring. It tells me nothing.
Yeah, a being that can do all that's logically possible cannot create a rock that is unliftable by its own maker. And they'll say that's perfectly consistent, except I can do that. I can create that state of affairs where this rock satisfies that logical description. I can... Like, you're not allowed to take away self-referencing from language. Like,
no,
I'm sorry,
it's if I can jump 5 feet in the air, it goes back to that basic subset containment there. If I can jump 5 feet, so can this omnipotent being. And if it's logically possible for me, it needs to be, by necessity there, logically possible for the omnipotent being.
Well, you also run into this problem of, like, I'm not allowed to ask, is it logically possible to jump 5 feet in the air? If I have to define the actor before I can define an action, that question just became incoherent. Because what does it mean to jump 5 feet in the air? It means to push one's feet off the ground. Any action is going to sort of contain that implicit reference to the actor.
Ooh, that's rather sneaky, but that's true.
Like, can God run 25 miles an hour? Well, it depends. Does he have legs and feet? And is he bound by gravity?
Is he in this whole timeless, spaceless?
Can God flap his
whateverness?
arms? Well, I don't know.
Yeah.
Does he have arms? Can a being that so you start getting this problem of where now the set of all that's logically possible simply becomes all that's logically possible for you, all that's logically possible for me, and all that's logically possible for omnipotent beings. So an omnipotent being can only do the set of all things that are logically possible for an omnipotent being.
Well, okay, so you're just saying that everybody's omnipotent. I feel a little better about myself, but if everything's going to be...
Now we have a problem. Because now, again, it goes back to the Q scenario. Dear Mr. Q, can you jump 5 feet in the air? And he'll just say, sorry, I don't have legs. A being that has no legs cannot logically jump.
Yeah.
Okay, Mr. Q, can you stand before a podium and truthfully state I'm not omnipotent? He'll say, sorry, I am omnipotent, which means I logically cannot do that. Okay, Mr. Q, can you create a pink elephant for me? So he'll say, sorry, I am a being bound by the laws of physics, and it's not logically possible for a being bound by physics to violate physics.
Sounds logically coherent
Now,
to me.
any entity can answer that way. You just made anything and everything omnipotent when you start doing that.
Yeah, again,
tautology.
every list you come up with, especially when you're trying to break the laws of physics, no list will be able to actually help me determine if this being really is omnipotent anymore.
The gauntlet now for the omnipotent being comes, dear Mr. Omnipotent Being, do all the things that you can do.
Mm-hmm.
The set of all things you can do, logically, if you can do them all, you're officially omnipotent. Well, I'm sorry, guys, that's tautologically true for fucking everything. It is not a useful definition when it applies to everything in existence.
Oh, yeah, I mean, it's a rock is omnipotent because it can do everything it's logically capable of doing.
So, again, a bad definition is recursive. This is the problem now. We went from Russell's paradox to just flat circular assertions, flat tautological truths.
Well, again, that's exactly what Russell is trying to tell you not to do. The moment you start having recursive definitions, you're getting into the pitfall of real troublesome scenarios. You really have to tiptoe around these things, but leave it to apologists to not care.
To not understand that. Yeah, that definition, if I follow it mechanically, now logically applies to myself. Now, to be fair, there is a comeback for this. They will say, well, there are things that you logically can do and things that you physically can do. And they'll sort of draw this distinction. Right? So God is not bound by the things that are physically restrictive, is what they're trying to get at. The problem, though, is, by definition, if I am a being bound by physics, I can now logically do all that is logically possible for me within that constraint. The moment you assign any property to anything, you have logically defined the things it can and can't do. So the set of all that's logically possible is identical to the set of all that's physically possible if you're a being bound by physics.
Yeah.
Right?
All I can say is, yeah, I'd like to point out when you're wrong, but I couldn't get you there.
So this is just the aggravating thing, is they go from terrible to awful to ridiculous.
Yeah, it's a...
And again, the challenge,
you have to just...
what do I say to this being on my doorstep to just answer the goddamn question? How do I tell whether or not this thing is omnipotent or not? That's really all this boils down to. What is the gauntlet I subject this thing to that says if you pass, you're omnipotent, and if you fail, you're not?
Right.
That's what we're trying to do. And if you don't just bear that
everything we're coming up with now, becomes logically possible and consistent. We're bound by physics. There you go. It doesn't matter what it is. Yes or no to any of the questions. It passes your test.
Yes.
And fails.
So with that all in mind, how do we define a good definition for, or how do we come up with a good definition for omnipotence? Well, this kind of just goes back to what you're asking me before. Well, it's just you define singular elements and then kind of work from there. For example, can you create matter and energy and arrange it? Can you create matter and energy ex nihilo? Yes or no? Can you arrange it to arbitrary whims? Yes or no? Okay. Now you're getting somewhere. And,
simple things there, yeah.
You know, well, can you teleport? Can you read my mind? Can you create universes? And so on. You know, you just start listing a bunch of things, and eventually you've pretty much captured what omnipotence is.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't used any universal quantifiers or unconditional, naive, unrestricted statements. I just listed a set of things that if he can or can't do these things, I will call it omnipotence.
Sure.
So this is why set theory is just so beautiful. It's simple, it's straightforward, it's consistent, and it's all figured out. Mathematicians worked this crap out 80 years ago, and we've been enjoying the fruits of their labors ever since. Philosophers just need to get on board with this stuff, because it's really annoying.
Well, they should be on board with it already, because a lot of it is just about logic anyways.
Well, a lot of this is boring.
Are math departments and philosophy departments so far apart on campuses everywhere that mathematicians and philosophers never actually meet up?
And I think the mathematicians look down on the philosophers for not understanding how logic works.
I think everyone looks down on the philosophers.
Yeah. I mean, this is something I realized when I read my first book on proof theory, is like, this is all the stuff that philosophers are supposed to know but can't seem to follow. It's like the mathematicians had to go out and do all the dirty work for them and efficiently define what it means to prove something and what logic is, and they just took that and ran with it, and a bunch of philosophers are still out there just kind of left in the dust.
Well, come on now. That would... I don't want to just blanket poo-poo philosophy.
Maybe there's some smart guys out there who've gotten on board with this. I mean, supposedly they have to take these classes at
okay, so I've talked to actual philosophers, and they seem to really know their stuff. But I think the main issue is that when you talk to an apologist on these things, are they really representing philosophy?
That's probably my bias. A huge chunk of my exposure to philosophers is mostly 2-bit hacks who are just trying to defend Jesus, and they want to sound sophisticated with their philosophical arguments for God, when the vast overwhelming majority of philosophers out there have already just like said, no, this thing doesn't work.
Yeah.
This is actually a spoiler. When you get criticism on things like the Omnipotence Paradox, you'll hear Christians saying, "Oh, philosophers don't really no philosopher really buys into that stuff. We figured that out decades ago, blah blah blah." Like, hello, 75% of philosophers in the academic profession are atheists. You really want to play that card?
If something is philosophically true or not, if you are dealing with a logical proposition, it's either true or false. It's not a popularity contest, anyways.
Yeah.
That is the wrongest way of determining if something's true or not.
Yeah. So, so that's what a good definition for omnipotence would be. It would be clear, and it would give me a gauntlet to subject to the burning bush to verify his claim. If I finally have a checklist that I can just subject this agent to and say, if you succeed at these challenges, you're officially omnipotent, and if you fail one, you're not. That's what we need at the end of the day. So
an actual clear distinction.
Yes.
That's true. So again, whenever we actually try to do that, let's point it out here. The moment we had to tear up a list, we lost that distinction. That's just an indicator that we were dealing with just a bad definition. Where if you would say yes or no on the list, it's not a determiner. It's a bad condition.
Right.
In a set theoretical sense, that's a horribly defined set.
Okay. So with that in mind, what do you say that we watch a video on YouTube.
Oh no! What do you have? just do it. What do you have here?
So a Mr. Drezd83.
Oh no.
believes that he can debunk the omnipotence paradox. So let's pull up his video here.
Why did it have to be Drezd? Oh boy.
Alrighty, so we'll just... Oh, there's our playlist. Alright.
Alright, so what do you have here?
All right, so we'll just stop right here. You'll notice he's already doing the whole appeal to authority. He just cited a couple of guys who say it's not an objection, and just assumes that the rest of the philosophical field just went along with their conclusions.
Okay.
This is one of the most annoying things about Drezd, is he thinks philosophy is not like regular science. Like when you publish a paper in physics or mathematics, that issue is more or less just considered to be settled until somebody really finds a way to break it or prove it wrong. But until that happens, the rest of the community will just be like, all right, that settles it. He did the legwork. We trust it. Philosophy is a little different. Any yokel can just write a paper and argue a bunch of crap, and if it just kind of sounds convincing, it'll get out there. Like, I like to think that they probably have good standards, but I've read really awful philosophical papers. Like that power beyond possibility paper. Like, how did that even get out into the literature?
Well, I could say there are good journals and bad journals.
Maybe he published in a terrible journal. So who knows? But like a lot of you just say percent philosophers who believe in X, and very few things will be unanimous. Like 75% are atheists. So I don't even know what he expects to accomplish this. I could just quote a dozen atheist philosophers and be like, it's settled. Why are we having this discussion? You're just going against the grain in philosophy.
Well, I mean, okay, so you say this philosopher says this one thing. Okay, here's my philosopher that says the exact opposite. Do we just slam these two philosophers together and they annihilate each other and there's a net gain of 0? I mean, what happens there?
Yeah.
What does it mean?
And you'll see a lot of that. I see a lot of this with Christian philosophers on YouTube especially. They love to just randomly cite some authority and just assume that that settles everything. Like, I can play that game too, and you really don't want to go down that road. Okay, so remember, this is their little narrow definition. We already went through like 5 different definitions in this discussion alone, right?
Well, yeah, again, Wikipedia shows a whole bunch of different definitions. I'm fine with that.
Yeah, and
okay, so this is their definition. Whoopity-doo.
Okay, so this is like the popular definition, but it's not like the only one. And I've been very explicit that there's lots of definitions for omnipotence. So we're going to see, he's going to pretend like this is the only one in existence, and we should just take this one as the definition. Okay. No, it isn't. It's defined by your little favorite guys.
No, you defined and agree with that definition.
Yes.
It is not the definition. It is
exactly
a definition. Yeah. Okay, but I'll play your game. This is the definition.
Okay. Okay, so first I just want to point out, you notice that little fade there that he did a cut? I actually showed a screen capture of a Christian website using almost the verbatim definition I just
that's
gave.
right, you did.
This fucker just
really
cut it out. Like, I'm just gonna not notice my own missing context. Yeah, and especially the point of the discussion at this is, again, there's more than one definition, you jackhole. You have your favorite, and that's fine, but there are more. So do you agree with me that those other definitions are just bad? Like, would it just kill you to say that out loud? I agree. Those are bad definitions. Just throw me a bone here.
Well, the lack of rebuttal is an implied agreement, I suppose.
Okay, he agrees with me. All right, we're on the same page. Huzzah. Okay, so he just said the consensus. No, it's not a consensus. There isn't even consensus on like anything. Like Platonism is pretty much split down the middle. The Newcomb paradox, the Newcomb problem is pretty much split down the middle.
Yeah.
Atheism is 0.75% agreed upon, with 0.25% being theist. You name anything in philosophy, and there will just not be a unanimous consensus.
Well, again, consensus does not imply true.
Well, in this case, it does, because we're talking about what the proper definition is.
Okay.
If all philosophers everywhere just used the same definition, then that's what we'd be glued to. But they don't. And again, like, it's not hard to find.
Universally, by all philosophers, it's just a consensus.
Yes. Okay, moving along. Now, this is sort of nebulous. I can kind of grant him that the smart thinkers probably moved above this. But, like, again, I've had actual comments on my videos from Christians themselves saying, well, God's just above logic. Screw your paradox. You can do it anyway.
Well, then again, if you don't like logic, I'm not talking to you anymore. You're one that doesn't want to make sense. Yeah, so forget. We gotta let those people go.
Can we just agree that this isn't exactly a consensus? That Now, that's also not really true. Like, he doesn't use those words. He uses slightly different words. He sort of implies that idea, but again, he's just saying things that aren't exactly true. He's being very sloppy. He just stated flat out, Thomas Aquinas agreed with me. Well, Rene Descartes disagreed. Like, what's your point?
Yeah.
Okay, so the ability to actualize any possibility. Well, that's slightly different, but okay.
We'll work with that. Logically possibility. You're just saying any.
Are we back to just we can work with that.
Fine.
We'll cut him some slack here. FYI, I was being very sarcastic in that modern academic definition, just so there's no confusion there. Hey, he skipped number 2. But whatever, he's pressed for time. I can grant that. All right, so this is one of those aggravating moments where I got so frustrated, I just had to draw a picture. Like, why is this so difficult? Just draw the set diagram. Things God can do, logically possible things, things I can do. And you just start enumerating that list, and you get inconsistencies.
Well, again, there's my subset. If I can do it, yeah.
So we're going to see a lot of very tortured logic to get out of this little problem, because there's the set definitions right there. Okay? So let's see where we go. That seems pretty intuitive to me. Right?
Idiot. Ha! I'm condescending too.
I mean, does it go on the list or not? What is this checklist I subject to an omnipotent being? Where do those things go on it or not? That's the question.
Well, okay, so I'm going to start cringing a lot here to say, okay, so it's possible for you is going to be distinctly different possibility for your God then. Okay. I'm starting to see where this is going to go.
Exactly. He just drew a big giant line down the middle. There's logically possible things that can be done, logically possible things I can do, and logically possible things God can do. The moment you fuss with those, you just killed your definition, and you're turning it into something else. So get ready for some more double talk.
Okay.
So, okay, this is the problem now.
Oh, I see what you did there. Oh, Maker changes definition.
Oh.
Yeah, that's the point, idiot. I'm going to be condescending. I'm intentionally condescending. Okay, sorry.
I will do my best.
No, why are you making me watching this? It's so cringeworthy. Oh, okay, go.
Okay. Well, it's technically not a complete sentence, but go on. Okay. Saul Kripke says so. Therefore, let's just take his word on.
Yeah. What's Saul want to finish off saying here? What's he saying?
And of course,
it depends on the context. So Maker is the context.
So hold on, let's let him finish. Okay, I have to be condescending now, but that's the fucking point, you idiot. The context is determined because the action has that little nebulous self-reference. I'm sorry, language is just funny like that.
Haha, Russell's Paradox.
Okay, does that action go on the list or not? Can you, candidate omnipotent being, create a stone that satisfies the description of being unliftable by its own maker? I'm sorry if that implicitly contains a self-reference, but fuck you, that's language. English is funny that way. You just kind of have to get used to it.
Again, it's not the stone's fault. It's the problem with the definition of omnipotence.
Exactly. Like, you're the one who said all that's logically possible. It's not my fault that that meaning changes with context. You just opened yourself up for that when you use these naive, unrestricted universal sets.
So if you want to add in, again, all that is logically possible by the agent, you lose all meaning. So my question is am I going to cringe when this happens because I can't imagine it going any other way at this point?
That's exactly where it's going to.
Oh god, you're going to waste my time with. Okay.
I absolutely.
Show me how stupid this is going to get.
There you go. Brace yourselves.
Wait, what?
You just said to lift a stone does not refer to a specific action. So I am literally not allowed to ask, "Dear sir, can you lift a stone?"
So that's not allowed on the list.
Does that go on the list of things that omnipotent beings should be able to do? Lift stones.
Tell me why I can't put that on my...
I'm sorry, I don't have to define the actor in order to define the action. Again, English is just funny that way, but tough. That's a problem with language. And I've exploited it because you were sloppy with your definition. So, literally, I cannot say...
Okay, so to be fair, he's trying to, again, fix it with all these conditionals, but at the beginning, we started with all that is logically possible. So, by those rules, all that is logically possible, you're going with it. I don't see a problem with it. And you saying, haha, gotcha, you messed up with your own definition, trying to add these other...
So it's like saying, I have a list. Things that an omnipotent being should be able to do. The action lift a stone is not on that list. I just can't ask, can you check off that item for me? Like it's just not allowed to go on the list of a possible challenge in action.
Okay. Let the man finish what he wants to say.
All right. So again,
no, okay, that's exactly the problem. No, you cannot do that. You said all that is logically possible, not all that's logically possible with the type of the agent. No. You didn't say that at the beginning. You did not say that was your definition. Sorry, but you got punked by anti-citizen X. I don't know what else to say to that. It's like you're trying to make up for the lack of the definition you had in the beginning by your masterful consensus of special philosophers, or wherever you want to go with that. It's sorry, you're trying to...
I guess it'd be fine if he just acknowledges that the original definition was sloppy.
Okay, sorry. That's what I'm trying to get at. Rather than trying to put all your fingers and all your friends' fingers into the dam that is just breaking apart, no, just say, sorry, what I really meant to say was this.
Exactly. That's all he has to do. That would immediately shut me up. It's just say, well, that definition isn't exactly what we really meant was logically, contextually possible within type sentences and their corresponding token or something like that. That would be a different definition.
Which is a correction, which is a further refinement to your definition, but it's fair game. So sorry, that's a logical possibility.
He's trying to have his cake and eat it too. He's trying to say, really, what I meant was this. Only really, the original one said that all along. Hee hee.
Only it
didn't. Like you have to give up one of those things. Either you were wrong, or you're wrong. Either you were wrong, or you're stuck with the bad definition. Like you can't have it both ways. Moving along.
Okay, moving along. Well, then tell me that in your damn definition.
Nuts. You were supposed to put that in your original definition, not me. Okay. So what he really meant was... Oh, so really an omnipotent being can actualize all possible states of affairs? That's different.
That's not all that is logically possible.
You're just changing the definition and then pretending it's really what it meant all along.
No, come on. This is basic moving the goalpost.
Yeah.
Bastard apologetic techniques here. It's no, I got you. You got to suck it up, man. You got to suck it.
It's like I don't even necessarily disagree. Just acknowledge that your original definition was sloppy, and I'll just be like, I agree. Then just tell me what you meant. But just could you throw me that little bone?
I think that'll be a no.
No. Oh, so omnipotence is the ability to actualize all token actions. Well, why didn't you fucking say so from the beginning? You see the problem?
Oh yeah.
See why we get pissed off at you idiots? This is a total moving goalpost. Okay. Did Thomas Aquinas say token actions?
No.
Is that what he meant?
Oh, what he really meant 800 years ago was what I said after. Yeah. No.
Now the real problem is he's going to fall into the tautological problem, and we'll just wait for it. He's just God can do all the things that God can do.
Oh,
just where
okay.
It's going.
You know where that's going to go. Just show me.
Enforcing tokens.
Finish my cringing. This is just.
Okay, so now we have an issue with the checklist. So I put that item on the list. Well, that's not really a thing on omnipotent beings.
Wait, no.
The answer is no.
I'm sorry, hold on. We were just trying to just nail down this omnipotence, and Rez here wants to just toss in all these other omnibenevolence and just...
Oh, that's a whole problem in and of itself. We don't have to worry about that today.
Buddy, you gotta focus here.
No, that's fine. Like, God is all those things, but just don't worry. They're totally compatible with each other, trust me. Even though we're not. All right. So, but... Well, the answer to the question is no, he can't. Why don't you just say so? God, no, an omnipotent being can't do that. That's a thing no omnipotent being can do. Like, that's really sort of where it goes. But your definition was sloppy. So, moving along.
Move along.
Wait. So, how do you know it's logically possible for God to lift a rock of any size?
Because that's a logical possibility.
Exactly. Like, how did that item get on the list? How did you come to that determination?
Again, if you're... what is going on now? Now I'm just getting lost. You just... Right there, you're saying you cannot lift, and then you're saying rock of any size?
No, he's saying it's logically possible for God to lift a rock of any size. Therefore, he can't create one he can't lift.
Okay.
So apparently the list is, Dear Q, can you create a rock of any size? That's the challenge that goes on my omnipotence list.
Okay.
What if... so don't worry, just wait for it.
All right.
Well, the question, how did you come to that original assertion that it was possible to create a rock of any size?
I don't know. Did we check our tokens properly?
Like, what was the algorithm that went in there? I mean, what if I'm not a being? What if I am physically...
Well, no, okay, so this again goes right back to, if I do this checklist with you, okay, can you lift a rock of any size? Well, is that a logical possibility for you? You being the token of this whole type sentence.
Right.
It's going to be, okay, so it's not logically possible for you.
Yeah.
You're going to say it is for... No! It's not making a clear distinction.
What happens when I stuff other tokens now?
Yeah.
I am a being bound by physical laws. Is it logically possible for a being bound by physical laws to violate conservation of mass and energy?
Is it possible for a being bound by physical laws to...
That's a contradiction.
Yeah.
But don't worry, I can still do everything that is logically possible within my specified token. Like, do you guys just not think this shit through? This is what just aggravates these problems. It doesn't count as solving the problem of the paradox when you just replaced it with a vapid tautology. How do you fail to see this? You just rendered anything and everything omnipotent.
There you go. That's the problem. If everything is omnipotent in and of itself,
nothing is.
Then nothing is.
Yeah. or it just becomes redundant to slap it on as a property of God. You might as well just say God is a being who has a word that can be spelled about it, which is true for pretty much everything. So why is it even on the list of things that differentiate God?
No, it's fallen into that problem where the definition itself is lost all meaning because you're just saying this token can do anything logically possible that this token can do given the right. No, that's too many conditionals. It falls apart.
Yes. The vagueness is still there, you moron. You don't refute an intrinsic property of language. What he did was redefine omnipotence around it to try and specifically avoid the vagueness. And with all due respect to Professor Kripke, you're a terrible fucking philosopher because you just rendered omnipotence a tautology.
Yep.
Is there anything we can add to that?
No, that's it. This thing is done. It's okay. You've so long as omnipotence is placed into the box of everything that's in that box is okay, but you can't look outside the box. The moment again, I'm not trying to be unambiguous when I say let me compare my omnipotence against yours.
Like they moved the goalposts in such a way that like now everything can just meet the goalpost. Like the goalpost just fell over. Now just anything.
No, that's everyone's a winner with every test. Yay!
Hooray!
No, okay. So I mean everything has just gone so derailed. No, damn it! I can make a pun about derailed. But okay, everything is so so gone at this point. It is just moot to even consider anything else beyond this point of the video.
Right, let's just go a little bit longer.
Oh, and you have more. Oh, great.
Okay. We're not even halfway through this thing. Oh yeah, here's my condescending rant now. And all you've done now is replace a paradox with a tautology. Hooray! So there's the part where he complains that philosophers...
Whoa! Wait a second. No! Dude, did you not look up Russell? Bertrand Russell. He was not a philosopher idiot. He was a mathematician.
Did you read mathematical papers? I can recommend a few.
Oh.
You're the one who wanted to play in set theory. Sorry. It's not my fault. Philosophers apparently don't read mathematical literature.
No.
If I were to go and conduct a poll and just find 10 philosophers who think, yeah, that's pretty sound, like, will that make me right?
No. Would they not say, well, I better check that with the mathematicians? Let me go check what they say? What? Yeah. Checking philosophy papers on a mathematical paper? Dude. Dude.
Right.
Now that's just an extra level of disappointment. I'm not mad. I'm disappointed, D-Rez.
I'm just disappointed. You let me down, champ. And we don't have to go through the rest of this. He just kind of complains about how God is not a Turing machine, so therefore the halting problem doesn't apply to him, and blah, blah, blah. It's just more...
No. God, everything's a tautology. Everyone's a winner. Everyone's omnipotent. Yay. No... Everyone gets ice cream. There you go.
Yeah. I mean, tell you what. I'm just going to recommend some reading. D-Rez, just go to... Oh, here we go. I got it right here. Go to Amazon. Look up An Introduction to Mathematical Logic by Richard E. Hodel. This will answer everything. Okay? It's all in the book. It was all discovered 80 years ago, okay? Well, that help you out there, champ? Okay, good. All right. You have been listening to... We don't have an official title for this. Rantings between Anti-Citizen and Charkopolis. I hope you found that entertaining, but my bladder is going
rantings to be titled later.
Omnipotence is not a thing. You can't have it. Just stop trying. Or okay, actually, no, you can have it. We even fixed it for you. We told you exactly how to have a coherent definition for omnipotence. Can you just stop trying to fix something that's broken beyond repair? I already repaired it for you.
Just admit when you've made a mistake. Just be honest.
Yes.
Just be fair.
Not like cut out context of things when we're trying to have discussions. God, I love Christians. They're just good people. I love them.
Okay. So I think with this discussion here and a fine rebuke to the res rebuttal, if that's the proper meaning.
Exactly. Yes. Okay. I followed that.
And I think it's fair to say we can finally put this omnipotence to rest.
Right. Like there is no paradox. You know why? Because I fixed it for you. We'll just say omnipotence is the capacity to create matter and energy and arrange ex nihilo and arrange it to arbitrary whims. There. Is that omnipotent enough for you?
Let's just leave it there.
Or something similar to that. Just enumerate the challenges I have to give to a random person claiming to be omnipotent. And what is the gauntlet this being must go through in order to satisfactorily be called omnipotent? And how will that gauntlet differentiate me from a meaningfully omnipotent thing versus a rock? Versus...
It's a simple thing to ask. I think we have thoroughly discussed that. Oh man, I think this can now actually be put to rest.
I should just publish my own philosophy paper and just explain this whole problem and just settle it.
And then you can self-reference yourself. Hey, there you
go. Okay. On that note, have a good night, everybody.
I cannot wait to hear about what we're going to discuss about next.
Hooray!